the place for literature is built by writers and readers. It's a fragile place in some ways, but an indestructible one.
Writing is very powerful. The freedom to write can unveil the mind.
I think if anything, maybe sometimes we underestimate the power of books.
Stories can make us aware of things that we wouldn't normally contemplate, like grace, like courage.
We actually record our thoughts and imaginations in our world on paper, and we're willing to stand by it.
Art is not entertainment. At its very best, it's a revolution.
Hello? Okay, wonderful. Hi, welcome and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Hannah Khosravi and I am the Program Manager for Research at PEN America. And as many of you know, PEN is an organization whose mission is to unite writers and their allies to celebrate the power of the written word and champion the freedom to write. This is our 20th PEN World Voices Festival, and since 2005, the festival has stayed true to its original mission of celebrating the power of storytelling and literature in translation and convening global voices across borders, languages, and culture. Over the last few years, PEN America has tracked an alarming rise in book bans across the United States, and our Freedom to Write Index, which just came out this last month, tracked the cases of over 300 writers who were detained or imprisoned around the world for their writing. In this particular moment of censoriousness, the festival will honor the power of literature and celebrate the stories that illuminate and interrogate what divides us and helps us to imagine new futures. This year, we're really proud to present over 35 events featuring more than 300 writers, over 4 days of celebration, dialogue, and cultural exchange, so there's still 2 more days to come. And we thank our members, our sponsors, the Goethe Institute, and our bookstore partner, Postman. I also want to share a special thanks to the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, the Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Amazon Literary Partnership for their invaluable support of our work. Now, I am especially pleased to introduce today's event, Translation Slam, and to welcome Daniel Kehlmann, Geoffrey C. Paul David Young, and Annelise Finegan for a lively debate about the creative challenges of translating literature. Geoffrey C. is a member of the PEN Translation Committee and has published translations of some 40 authors. Paul David Young is a playwright, translator, and critic whose writing has been published extensively in the Brooklyn Rail, Art in America, and Hyperallergic. Geoffrey and Paul have translated a new passage from author Daniel Kehlmann, whose novel Measuring the World has been translated into more than 40 languages and is one of the biggest successes in post-war German literature. This discussion will be moderated by Annelise Finegan, a clinical associate professor of translation and directs the graduate program in translation and interpreting at NYU. Thank you all so much for coming today, and thank you to our guests for taking part in what promises to be a wonderful event. Welcome to Daniel, Geoffrey, Paul, and Annelise.
This is a participatory event, so I'd like to start with knowing who in the room is a translator. Show of hands. Okay, that's wonderful. Who in here has been to a translation slam before? Okay, about a quarter of you. There's some conventions to translation slams. The first is that we open with a reading. We'll start with the original source text in German, and then there will be 2 readings of the translations for you to compare. Following that, we'll do a question and answer session and be opening it up to all of you to share questions that you have for the translators and for the author today. Now, you're also allowed to, clap and cheer and let us know how you feel about these different versions. And then also, something really special about this particular translation slam is that this is a performance text. This is a play, and you're going to hear 3 versions of it in succession. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Kehlmann.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting and a lot of fun. We can talk about this later. I'm not trying to make light of what's happening in this country, but I was thinking, I wrote this in German. I brought it here. These 2 wonderful gentlemen have translated it. I have not translated either of these gentlemen, so there's a trade deficit here. And I don't even know whether we will be allowed to do this in a year from now. So. Should I say what this kind of text this is and where it's from? Yeah. So this is the beginning of a 1-act play. I've never read it to an audience anywhere or seen it performed yet. It will be done in September in Vienna, in Theater in der Josefstadt. And this is the first, this is just the beginning. The whole thing is about an hour. But this is just the first, 8 to 10 minutes, I guess. And I'm going to read it in German because that's the format. So apologies to everyone here who doesn't speak German, but that's how we're going to do this. You'll get the translation. It's called Ostern, ein Einakter. Ein Hotelzimmer, Tisch, Fernseher, Schrank, ein Stuhl, ein Fenster. Der Schauspieler Jodok Americh, ein imposanter Mann von Mitte 50, wendet sich ans Publikum. Sitzen Sie gut? Der Mensch neben Ihnen nicht zu breit, der vor Ihnen nicht zu groß, temperaturträglich? Im Theater ist es ja eigentlich immer zu heiß. Parken Sie gut? Weil das muss man schon. Wenn man im Parkverbot steht, denkt man die ganze Zeit ans Auto, wie es steht und steht und steht oder eben vielleicht nicht, weil es abgeschleppt wird. Man kann sich nicht konzentrieren, da fährt man besser in die Garage. Ich weiß, dass Sie nicht wirklich da sind. Ich bin ja nicht verrückt, noch nicht ganz, obwohl ich es sein müsste. 10 Tage in diesem Hotelzimmer und ja, am 2. Tag ist das Internet ausgefallen. Ich rufe an der Rezeption an, die sagen mir, das Netzwerk wird angezeigt. Ich sage, nein, das Netzwerk wird angezeigt, aber kein Internet. Sie sagt, was meinen Sie? Netzwerk ist nicht Internet. Netzwerk heißt, mein iPad ist mit einem Router verbunden, aber der Router ist nicht im Internet. Verstehen Sie? Sie? Nein. Gibt es einen Techniker? Sie? Ja, kann ich mit dem sprechen? Sie ist nicht hier. Dann legt sie auf. Einen Tag später rufe ich wieder an. Gibt es was Neues? Internet? Aber es ist eine andere Stimme. Was ist mit dem Internet? Es gibt kein Internet. Das ist mit dem Internet. Haben Sie Internet? Wir haben Internet. Sie vielleicht, aber ich nicht. Mein iPad ist im Netz, aber es hat kein Internet. Das Netz, verstehen Sie? Sie, im Netz ist kein Internet. Ja. Verbunden mit dem Router, aber Router nicht im Netz. Sie, nichts, Stille, Schweigen, längst vergessener Völkermüdigkeiten. Kann ich kurz runterkommen, einen Moment nur in die Lobby mit dem iPad, ganz kurz Ihnen zeigen, Sie sind in Hotelquarantäne, Sie müssen im Zimmer bleiben. Muss ja keiner wissen. Sie, was heißt keiner wissen? Schämen Sie sich. Es würde gegen kein Gesetz verstoßen. Das Parlament hat nämlich nicht abgestimmt. Es tritt ja wegen Corona nicht mehr zusammen, aber da hat sie schon aufgelegt. Am Abend versuche ich es wieder. Jetzt ist es die Frau vom Vortag. Sie wieder mit dem Internet. Alle anderen haben Internet. Ja, was soll ich jetzt da tun? Sie, ja, was soll ich jetzt da tun? Also, kurz zusammengefasst, meine Damen und Herren, ich bin seit 3 Tagen in diesem Hotelzimmer, 8 Quadratmeter etwa, inklusive Nasszelle. Ja, ich habe wirklich Nasszelle gesagt, denn das, was ich da habe, ist kein Badezimmer, das ist eine Nasszelle. So nennen das Architekten von grässlicher Architektur. Und keiner wechselt das Bettzeug, weil ich bin ja in Quarantäne, da kann man doch nicht einfach das Bettzeug wechseln. Das wäre gegen all die Gesetze, die nicht beschlossen wurden, weil ja Corona ist, sodass kein Parlament zusammentreten kann, die aber beschlossen worden wären, wenn nicht Corona wäre, außer dass man in diesem Fall natürlich keine Gesetze gegen Corona beschließen müsste. Ich dachte, na gut, dann lese ich Goethe und sonst sehe ich Serien an, aber jetzt geht das Internet nicht. Ich habe einen Fernseher, aber er schaltet den Fernseher ein. Im Fernseher ist ein verschneites Bild zu sehen, er selbst, wie er sich lächelnd ansieht. Am Anfang war da noch tolles Programm, war da noch normales Programm. Nichts Tolles, aber wenigstens Gewinnspiele und so, manchmal Nachrichten. Jetzt nichts mehr, jetzt nur noch das. Ich weiß, ich bin zu lange eingesperrt. Hier sehe ich mich, dort sehe ich Sie. Altes Schauspielerproblem. Er schaltet den Fernseher aus. Sie kennen mich. Schließlich sind Sie im Theater. Also kennen Sie Jodok Americh. In einem Kino oder auf der Straße wäre das nicht sicher. Aber hier, man hat mich den entscheidenden Hamlet der Nullerjahre genannt. Nicht den besten, jeder kann der Beste sein, den entscheidenden. Vielleicht haben Sie mich auch in Wer hat Angst vor Virginia Woolf oder in Der einsame Weg gesehen. Das war natürlich bevor... Er verstummt, schaltet den Fernseher ein, sieht dort sich selbst, blickt einen Moment in sein eigenes Gesicht und schaltet wieder ab. Und so sitze ich jetzt hier fest, im Hotel. Geimpft bin ich einmal, zweimal, ich glaube sogar 4-mal, aber es hilft nichts. Wer aus dem Ausland kommt und keine Wohnung hat, muss in Hotelquarantäne. Und das Hotel kann man nicht aussuchen. Schauen Sie sich das an. Keinen Tag würden Sie hier verbringen wollen, aber ich bin schon 5 Tage hier. Oder 6, ich könnte nachsehen, es sind 6. Ich brauche nicht nachsehen, 6. Es sind 7 Tage. Und ich habe noch 5. Dann darf ich hinaus. Dann drehe ich meinen Film. Eine internationale Koproduktion. Also darf ich schon einen Akzent haben, aber nicht zu viel. Das ist meine Chance, meine einzige Chance auf einen internationalen. Hier am Theater werden Sie mich lange nicht mehr beschäftigen. Sie haben sicher auch meinen Tweet gesehen oder davon gelesen, als die Zeitungen darüber geschrieben haben oder retweetet von Leuten, die Jodok Americh, du Schwein oder Schande über Americh oder Never Again Loser oder naja solches und von solche mehr, 1000-fach und ich gebe zu, es war nicht, also ich war betrunken. Es war sehr spät und meine Freundin hatte mir gesagt, dass ich entweder meine Frau verlassen muss oder sie nie wiedersehe, aber meine Frau hatte mir gesagt, dass sie alle meine Steuererklärungen hat, also was kann man da tun? Und bitte der Umstand, dass sie mich mit meinen Steuererklärungen erpresst. Ich weiß, was Sie denken, aber das heißt nicht, dass sie mich nicht mehr liebt. Wir haben eben so eine Beziehung. Vor 3 Jahren war Erika bereit, mich gehen zu lassen. Sie hat mich sogar gebeten zu gehen und ich glaube, sie hatte auch jemanden. Und da habe ich den Hund vergiftet. Einer von uns macht immer sowas und der andere bleibt dann. Er war schon alt, der Hund. Das müssen Sie wissen, das war wirklich schon ein alter, grauer Kerl. Er hat auch beim Atmen immer so gepfiffen und er hatte auch Verdauungsprobleme. Rasse kann man nicht sagen, war alles drin. Quadflick hieß er. Also lange hätte Quadflick es ohnehin nicht mehr gemacht, aber als Erika mich hinauswerfen wollte, ja, es hat keine strikte Logik, da haben Sie recht, er war sogar mehr mein Hund als ihrer. Es war also nicht so, dass ich das getan habe, um sie zu verletzen. Sie mochte den Hund eigentlich nicht. Es war einfach, um eine starke Geste zu setzen. Ich habe ihm ein bisschen Strychnin gegeben, er ist ganz sanft entschlafen, hat nur noch ein bisschen gezuckt und gewimmert und ich habe ihn Erika gezeigt und sie hat geweint und ich habe sie umarmt, ganz lange. Ich glaube, sie hatte einen Verdacht. Ich habe ihr natürlich nichts gesagt, aber warum sollte der Hund genau in dem Moment krepieren, in dem ich aus dem Haus soll? Das wäre entweder ein enormer Zufall oder regelrecht metaphysisch. Aber jetzt fragen Sie sich wahrscheinlich, woher hatte der Americh Strychnin? Internet. Jedenfalls, ich war betrunken an dem Abend, was nicht so oft passiert, wie man denken würde. Und Lise hatte mir gesagt, dass sie mich verlässt, wenn ich nicht Erika verlasse. Und Erika hatte mir gesagt, dass sie meine Steuererklärungen hat, was nicht unbedingt eine Drohung ist, obwohl, naja, es ist eigentlich schon eine Drohung. Denn sie hat ja nicht nur die Steuerunterlagen, sondern weiß auch, was mit denen nicht stimmt. Also zum Beispiel, als ich die Tournee durch die Schweiz gemacht habe und dort habe ich ein Konto aufgemacht und all die Honorare sind nie über die Grenze. Oder auch, als ich in Japan aufgetreten bin und dort wurde ich in Naturalien bezahlt. Egal, ich war zwischen 2 Frauen und all die Drohungen und vor allem war ich auch noch gar nicht lange auf Twitter und gerade hatte ich noch erfahren, dass ich die Rolle bei der BBC nicht bekommen würde, weil ich nicht geimpft war. Also Sie verstehen, ich war natürlich geimpft, aber nicht in England. Und die englische Regierung hat beschlossen, dass nur eine in England verabreichte Impfung eine Impfung ist. Also selbst ein englischer Bürger gilt als ungeimpft, wenn er im Ausland geimpft worden ist, und als Ungeimpfter darf er natürlich nicht einreisen. Und das heißt, wer zufällig zur Zeit der Impfkampagne im Ausland war, der darf erstmal nicht nach England. Und daher kriegte die Rolle des deutschen Philosophen in der Thackeray-Verfilmung ein anderer. Und zwar nicht irgendeiner, sondern der völlig verblödete Arsch Schrömminger. Und zwar nur deshalb, weil er gerade mit seiner genauso verblödeten Frau Jane in London lebt. Und dann hat er es sich nicht nehmen lassen, mich anzurufen und nichts für ungut zu sagen. Ich weiß, dass es deine Rolle war, aber unter diesen Umständen, und ich natürlich, lieber Adolf, ich weiß doch, es ist doch nicht dein Fehler, du wirst es wunderbar machen. Und er, ich kann ja auch besser Englisch als du, und ich stirb, du Sauge, scheißen verreckt, du unbegabtes Stück Dreck. Nein, das habe ich natürlich nicht gesagt, das habe ich nur gedacht. Doch, ich habe es gesagt, leider. Aber das war ja auch wirklich nicht nötig, dass er mir so kommt. Vor allem, weil ich ja wirklich kaum Englisch kann.
World premiere. So for those of you who know German, you enjoyed that. And for those of you who may not know German, you got to study audience reaction, and you'll appreciate especially the work that translators do. So we're going to turn now to Jeff.
Easter, excuse me, Easter, a one-act play, a hotel room, a table, a television, a wardrobe, one chair, one window. The actor Jodok Americh, an imposing man in his mid-50s, addresses the audience. Are you comfortable? The person next to you isn't spreading too much? The one in front of you is not too tall? The temperature's bearable? Of course, theaters are always too hot, aren't they? Did you park okay? Because that's important, you know. If you're parked illegally, you can't stop thinking about your car, how it's sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. Or maybe it isn't because it's getting towed. You can't concentrate, so you might as well use the parking structure. I know you're not really here. It's not like I'm crazy, at least not totally, even though I ought to be. 10 days in this hotel room, and wouldn't you know it, on the second day the internet goes out. I call the front desk, and they tell me the network sign is showing, and I say, no, the network is showing, but not the internet. And she says, what do you mean? I say, network's not the same as internet. Network means my iPad is connected to a router, but the router's not connected to the internet. Do you understand? She says, no. Me, do you have a tech guy? Her, yes. Me, can I talk to him? Her, it's not here. Then she hangs up. The next day I call again. Any news, internet-wise? But it's a different voice. What about the internet? Me, there is no internet. That's what's about the internet. Have you got internet? We've got internet. Me, maybe you do, but I don't. My iPad's connected to the network, but the network has no internet. Do you understand? Her, there's no internet on the network? Me, yeah, I'm connected to the router, but the router's not hooked up to the net. Her, silence, not a sound, zilch. The weariness of long-forgotten peoples. Me, can I come down there for a minute? Just for a second, to the lobby with my iPad so I can show you to you real quick? Her, you're in hotel quarantine. You have to stay in your room. Me, nobody needs to know. She, what do you mean nobody needs to know? Shame on you. Me, it wouldn't be breaking any laws because Parliament hasn't voted on it since they aren't meeting anymore due to COVID. But she's already hung up. I try again that evening. This time it's the woman from the day before. You again with your internet? Everybody else has internet. Me, well, what am I supposed to do about it? Her, well, what am I supposed to do about it? So, long story short, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in this hotel room for 3 days, about 8 by 10 feet square, including the lavatory. Yes, I really did say lavatory, because what I've got here isn't a bathroom, it's a lavatory. That's what architects who design terrible architecture call it. And nobody's changing the linens because I'm in quarantine, and you can't simply change the linens. It'd be against the laws, which haven't been passed because it's COVID, which means Parliament can't meet. But they would have been passed if it wasn't COVID, except, of course, in that case, there'd be no need. This is the thing about handheld. mics, there'd be no need to pass any laws against COVID. I thought, all right then, I'll just read Goethe or else watch some series, but now the internet isn't working. I have a TV, but he turns the TV on. The screen shows a fuzzy image. It's him smiling at himself. At first, they still had regular programming. Nothing great, but at least game shows and stuff. Occasional news. Not anymore. Now all there is that. I've been cooped up too long. Oh, I know, I've been cooped up too long. I see myself here. I see you out there. An old actor's problem. He turns the TV off. You know who I am. You're at the theater, so you know Jodok Amrich. At the movies or on the street, you wouldn't be sure, but here, they called me the definitive Hamlet of the aughts. Not the best one. Anybody can be the best one. The definitive one. Maybe you've also seen me in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf or The Lonely Way by Schnitzler. Of course, that was before he breaks off, turns the TV on, and sees himself on it. He peers at his own face for a moment and turns it off again. And so I'm stuck here now in this hotel. I've been vaccinated once, twice, I think even 4 times, but it does no good. If you come from abroad and don't have a residence, you've got to quarantine in a hotel, and you can't pick your own hotel. Just look at this. You wouldn't want to spend even 1 day here, but I've already been here for 5 days. Or is it 6? I could look it up. It's been 6. I don't need to look it up. 6. It's been 7 days, and still I have 5 to go, and then I can get out. Then I'll work on my film, an international co-production, so it's fine if you have an accent, but not too much of one. This is my only chance for an international. Here at the theater, it'll be a long time before they hire me again. I'm sure you've seen my tweet, or read about it when the papers wrote about it, or people retweeted it. Jodok Amrich, you bastard, or shame on Amrich, or never again, you loser, or, well, stuff like that, 1,000 times over, and I admit I wasn't, well, I was drunk. It was late, and my girlfriend had told me either I leave my wife or I'll never see her again. But my wife told me that she's got my tax returns. I know what you're thinking, but that doesn't mean she doesn't still love me. That's just the kind of relationship we have. 3 years ago, Erica was ready to let me go. She even asked me to leave, and I think she even had somebody else. And then I poisoned the dog. One of us always does something like that, and then the other one stays. He was already pretty old, the dog. You have to realize that he was a really old gray pooch. He always kind of whistled when he breathed, and he had problems with his digestion too. Breed? Hard to say. A little bit of everything. Quatflieg was his name, so Quatflieg wouldn't have lasted much longer anyway. But when Erica was going to throw me out, sure, it's not strictly logical. You're right about that. He was even more my dog than hers, so it wasn't as if I did it to hurt her. Actually, she didn't really like that dog. It was just meant to be a powerful gesture. I gave him a little strychnine. He passed away quite peacefully, just a few last twitches and whimpers. And then I showed him to Erica, and she cried, and I hugged her for a long, long time. I believe she suspected something. Of course, I didn't tell her anything, but why would the dog kick off right at the moment I was supposed to move out? That would either be a huge coincidence or something downright metaphysical. But now you're probably wondering where Amrich got hold of the strychnine. Internet. Be that as it may, I was drunk that evening, which doesn't happen as often as you might think. And Lisa has told me that she would leave me if I didn't leave Erica, and Erica had told me that she has my tax records, which is not necessarily a threat, even though, well, yeah, it is a threat, because she not only has my tax records, she also knows what isn't correct about them. For instance, when I was on tour in Switzerland and opened an account there and none of my fees ever made it across the border. Or when I performed in Japan and got paid in kind. Whatever, I was between 2 women and there were all those threats, but mostly I hadn't been on Twitter very long and I had just found out that I wouldn't get the role with the BBC because I wasn't vaccinated. Now don't get me wrong, of course I was vaccinated, but not in England. And the English government decided that only a vaccination administered in England is a vaccination. That means that even an English citizen is considered unvaccinated if he got vaccinated in another country. And of course, as an unvaccinated person, he cannot enter the country, which means that anyone who happened to be abroad during the vaccination campaign can't travel to England in the first place. And that's why somebody else got the role of the German philosopher in the film version of Thackeray. And not just anybody, but that totally moronic asshole Schrödinger. And then only because he happens to be living in London with his equally moronic wife, Jane. And then he decided it was a good idea to call me up to say, no hard feelings. I know it was your role, but under the circumstances. And of course, I'm like, my dear Adolf, I know it's not your fault, and you'll do a wonderful job. And he's like, of course, I do speak better English than you. And I'm like, die, scumbag, fuck off, drop dead, you talentless piece of crap. No, of course, that's not what I said. I only thought it. No, I did say it. Unfortunately. But he really didn't have to come at me like that, especially because I really can't speak much English.
Thank you, Jeff. And now for our second translation, we have Paul.
Easter, a one-act play. A hotel room, table, television, closet, a chair, a window. The actor, Jodok Amarich, an impressive man in his mid-50s, turns toward the audience. Amarich. Are your seats comfortable? The person next to you isn't too fat, or the one in front of you too tall. Temperature's okay? To be honest, it's always a little too hot in the theater. Did you find a place to park? Because you have to. If you park illegally, you're thinking about your car the whole time, how it's sitting and sitting and sitting there. Or perhaps not, because it's been towed. You can't concentrate. It's better to park in the garage. I know you're not really there. I'm not crazy. Still not completely, anyway. Although I should be. 10 days in this hotel room, and of course, on the second day, the internet goes dead. I call the reception who tell me that the network is displaying. I say, no, the network is displaying, but no internet. She says, what do you mean? Me. The network is not the internet. The network means that my iPad is connected to a router, but the router is not in the internet. Do you understand? Her. No. Is there a technical person? Her. Yes. Me. Could I speak to that person, please? Her. They're not here. Then she hangs up. I call again a day later. Any news? Internet? But it's a different voice. Is there something wrong with the internet? Me. There's no internet. That's what's wrong with the internet. Do you have access? We have access. Me. You might, but I don't. My iPad is connected to the network, but there's no internet. The net. Get it? Her. There's no internet on the network. Me. Yes. I am connected to the router, but the router is not in the net. Her. Nothing. Quiet. Silence. The exhaustion of people's long forgotten. Me. Do you mind if I come down? Just for a second in the lobby to show you my iPad very quickly. Her. You are in hotel quarantine. You must remain in your room. Me. Nobody has to know. Her. What do you mean nobody has to know? Shame on you. Me. It wouldn't break the law. The parliament hasn't made a decision. It was no longer meeting because of Corona. But then she had already hung up. That evening I try again. It's the woman from the day before. You again about the internet. Everyone else has internet. Me. What am I supposed to do about it? Her. Yeah. What am I supposed to do about it? Okay, summarizing quickly, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in a hotel room for 3 days, about 8 square meters, including the wet area. Yep, I said wet area because what I've got here is not a bathroom, it's a wet area. That's what it's called by the architects of abominable architecture. And nobody changes the sheets because I'm in quarantine. You can't just go changing the sheets in quarantine. That would be completely against the law. Well, against the laws that have not been enacted because of the corona, obviously, since the parliament can't meet, which, however, would have been enacted if there were no corona, except that in this case, of course, no laws had to be enacted because of corona. I thought, okay, then I'll read Goethe and watch a bunch of TV series, but the internet doesn't work. I have a television, but He turns on the television. Snow covers the picture on the television screen. Himself as he watches himself, smiling. At the start, there was still the usual programming. Nothing great, but at least game shows and that kind of things. Sometimes the news. Not anymore. Now only this. I know, I've been confined too long. I see myself here, and there I see you. The old actor's paradox. He turns off the television. You know me. After all, you're in a theater, so you have to know Jodok Americh. At the movies or out on the street somewhere, it wouldn't be so obvious, but here. They called me the decisive Hamlet of the 2000s. Not the best, everybody can be the best, the decisive. Or perhaps you've seen me in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, or in The Lonely Way. Of course, that was before. He stops speaking, turns on the television, sees himself in it, looks for a moment at his own face, and turns it off again. And so I'm stuck here now in the hotel. I've been vaccinated once, twice, I think even 4 times. But it doesn't matter. Whoever arrives from a foreign country and doesn't have a residence has to go into hotel quarantine. And you don't get to choose the hotel. Look at this. Nobody would want to spend a single day here, but I've been here 5 days already. Or is it 6? I could check. It's 6. I don't have to check. 6? It's been 7 days. I have 5 to go, and then I get to leave. Then I can make my film, an international co-production. So it's okay to have an accent, but not too much. This is my only chance to do an international. They won't work with me here in the theater anymore. You've surely seen my tweet or read about it. When the newspapers covered it, or the retweets by people like Jodok Americh, you pig, or shame on Americh, or never again, loser, or okay, that kind of thing, and more, thousands of times, and I admit, it wasn't. So I was drunk, it was late, and my girlfriend said to me that I had to either leave my wife or I'd never see her again, but my wife told me that she had all of my tax returns, so what can you do in a situation like this? And please, under the circumstances that she was blackmailing me with my tax returns, and I know what you're thinking, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't love me anymore. We have that kind of relationship. 3 years ago, Erica was ready to let me leave. She even asked me to leave, and I think, she's got someone. Then I poisoned the dog. One of us was always doing something like that, and the other would stay. He was already old, the dog. You have to understand, he was already a really old gray thing. He'd whistle, kind of, when he breathed. And he had digestion issues. What kind of dog? I can't really say. There was a little bit of everything. Quadflieg, I called him. So, Quadflieg wouldn't have lasted much longer anyway, but since Erica wanted to kick me out, okay, the logic's not exactly airtight or right there, but he was more my dog than hers, so it wasn't like I did it to hurt her. She really didn't like the dog. It was just a way to make a big gesture. I gave him a little strychnine, he went gently to sleep, just a little jerking around and whimpering, and I showed him to Erica, and she cried, and I embraced her a long while. I think she suspected something. Naturally, I didn't say anything. But why should the dog die just at that moment when I'm supposed to be out of the house? That would either be a tremendous accident or downright metaphysical. But now you're probably asking yourself, where would Americh get strychnine? The internet. Anyway, I was drunk that night, which didn't happen as often as one might think, and Lisa told me that she was leaving me if I didn't drop Erica, and Erica told me that she had my tax records, which is not necessarily a threat, although, well, okay, it actually was a threat, because not only did she have the tax records, but she also knew what was wrong with them, as, for example, when I did a tour in Switzerland. and I opened an account there, and all the honoraria never crossed the border. Or when I was appearing in Japan, and there I was paid in kind, or whatever. I was between two women and all the threats, and most important, I hadn't been on Twitter that long, and I had just learned that I would not get the part with the BBC because I wasn't vaccinated. You should understand that, of course, I was vaccinated, but not in England. And the English government had decided that a vaccination is only a vaccination if it is administered in England. Even an English citizen was considered unvaccinated if he had been vaccinated abroad. And as an unvaccinated person, he could not, of course, immigrate. Which means that whoever happened to be out of the country at the time of the vaccination campaign could not travel to England for the first time, and so somebody else got the part of the German philosopher in the Thackeray film, and not just anybody, but that fucking idiot asshole Schrödinger, and only because he already lived in London with his equally fucking idiot asshole wife, and then naturally he could not refrain from calling me up and meaning no offense, saying, "I know it was your role, but under the circumstances." And I naturally replied, "Dear Adolf, I know it's not your fault. You'll be great." And him, "My English is better than yours." And me, "Die a miserable death, you pig, eat shit, rot in hell, you talentless piece of filth." No, of course I didn't say that. I only thought it. Oh, damn straight I said it. Unfortunately. But it was quite unnecessary for him to come at me like that, if for no other reason than that in truth I can barely speak English.
So following the conventions of the Translation Slam, that was the first time that our author heard either translation or the translators heard each other's translation. So I hope you've enjoyed watching their faces as much as I have. In the room over there a few minutes ago, I was listening to you while you were talking, and I heard both Jeff and Paul say, "Well, I took risks with this translation." So that's my first question to each of you. Tell us about a risk you took in this translation. Jeff.
Listening to Paul's translation, I realized the risk I took overall was that I tried to present the exasperated Americh, and you presented the actor Americh more than I did. And so my risk was more to make it more colloquial, more American, and less like an actor talking from the stage. And I think I can justify my risks, but I think that I like Paul's better.
He likes yours better. Paul, tell us about a risk. Paul, could you share with us about a risk that you took in the translation? And could you maybe...
Well, that would be a confession. Whoops. Let's see. Well, in the first paragraph, I sort of de-Germanized it, I guess, somewhat in the word order, and like in the sentence, "It's better to park in the garage." I forget what it is in German, but it's a much more convoluted kind of phrase, and so I twisted it a couple of times. And then at the end, I guess, with the curse words, one of them I'd never actually seen in German before, but it didn't translate very well, and so I just kind of made up something that was equivalently kind of offensive. And then, sort of in the spirit of that, I added a couple of other curse words in there that weren't in the text, but they kind of had that anger that I felt in the speaker's, the voice there.
Okay, so spiraling profanity as your risk. And Daniel, speaking about this character you've created, one translator calls him imposing, and the other calls him impressive. Who's right?
He has to be both, of course. I mean, it's not a novel. It's not like you have to spend many hours of your life with him. It's just a play, a short play. It's a one-act play. So he can be really annoying and repulsive, and still at the same time. So I hope he can be fun and interesting, at least for an hour. And I hope they're both right. Of course, I hope both words apply.
Wonderful. Another part about the translations that struck me in reading them, Jeff and Paul, and I'll start with you this time, Paul. Your last lines are completely different. I mean, just worlds apart. And I wondered if you might share with us your process there.
I can't remember what the German was. I just tried to unspool it a lot, the last sentence, so that it...
Find the German first?
Yeah, it
Let's
sounded
see,
less
where's
German.
my German text?
If for no other reason than that, in truth, I can barely speak English. And I also wanted to have the English sort of be the clincher at the end of the sentence, so you didn't know what he was talking about until you got to the very end.
The German is vor allem, weil ich ja wirklich kaum Englisch kann.
And Jeff, your version?
My version is, no, I have to find it, but I think I can
It's
remember.
on the first page.
Yeah. Especially because I really can't speak much English.
Which is closer, yeah.
And
yeah.
the problem, and German translators are familiar with this problem, is the word kaum, which means hardly. But if you translate it as hardly, it doesn't work as well, right? Because I can hardly speak English. It would not work in several ways, including prosodical ways. You know.
The profanity was really interesting in this text, and you were promised a special guest, so I think we'll move to that now. That is, of course, ChatGPT or machine translation. And Daniel has very generously offered to just these excerpts. We're not going to do the whole thing, but to share this with you. And I really would encourage listening to the voice of this translation.
I mean, I'm not going to do a ChatGPT voice. That's always very enthusiastic. Like, I'm reading it like a real person. Are you sitting comfortably? The person next to you not too wide, the one in front not too tall, temperature bearable? It's always too hot in the theater anyway. Did you park well? Because that's important. If you're in a no parking zone, you just keep thinking about the car, how it's sitting there, or maybe not because it's being towed. You can't concentrate. So, to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in this hotel room for 3 days, about 8 square meters, including a wet cell. Yes, I really said wet cell, because what I have here isn't a bathroom. It's what architects of terrible buildings call a wet cell, and nobody changes the bedding because I'm in quarantine. That's why the role of the German philosopher in the Thackeray adaptation went to someone else. Not just anyone, but that utterly brain-dead idiot Schrödinger. Only because he happens to live in London with his equally idiotic wife Jane, and then he had the nerve to call me and say, no hard feelings, I know it was your part, but under the circumstances, and of course I said, dear Adolf, I know it's not your fault, you'll be brilliant. And he said, well, I do speak better English than you. And I said, die, you pig, eat shit, rot, you talentless sack of garbage. No, of course I didn't say that. I only thought it. Actually, I did say it, unfortunately. But really, it was uncalled for, the way he rubbed it in. Especially since, let's be honest, I really can't speak much English.
Feel free to applaud. You know, there's so many limitations on the voice there, and I particularly love "Did you park well?" It's a great point of comparison. Very briefly, Jeff or Paul, if you have anything to say about this other competitor, and then we're going to open up to questions from all of you.
Well, I was more impressed than I thought I would be at first. For one thing, he translated that last line that we talked about. He, it, what do you call him? They translated the same way I did. And it took me a while to get around to that version. And so I thought, well, okay.
And I have to say, I'm impressed with the that it wasn't necessary, it was uncalled for the way he rubbed it in. Because in German it just says, dass mir so kommt. So it's just that he would do this, or that he would put it like that. And so this is really an instance where the algorithm understands it. Like, he gets it. It gets it. It gets it. So this is kind of impressive, that line.
I wished I had thought of that after I saw it. I said came at me that way, which is stronger than what the German really implies. You know?
In German, he doesn't say anything like that. He just, because he's ashamed, he just implies it. And I'm not saying it's the best translation. That's a different question. But I'm impressed that it understood that.
Paul?
Yes, it is. I struggle with that a little bit because it's such a simple sentence, but it has meaning, and you have to sort of interpolate a lot of things into those few words to get the meaning otherwise, because it's a sentence that consists of really common words used in a very straightforward way, but what they mean in that context has to be sort of fleshed out, I think.
And I can't remember yours, but I liked it better than mine, for sure. I think we have to address this wet cell thing briefly.
Oh.
We have to.
I had never heard the word Nastzelle in German before, but I looked it up, and it's a technical term that architects use.
It's a terrible, ugly technical term.
Where all the plumbing comes together, right? And it's a room that's sealed off with tile and grout. And so I went for lavatory, and I looked it up and found out that architects do use that word as a technical word for the bathroom sometimes. But wet cell has to do with electric things,
with
batteries, and so that was a direct translation that didn't work.
So not all translations work. We're going to go to questions from you. There's a microphone circulating. Hands up, right there. Yeah, right there.
Hi. As I do theater, I saw two different actors, and actually 3 different actors. And so my question is, when you translate something that in this case is theater, do you see someone saying these words? Because it was very different, 2 different shows for me from here.
2 different shows, I love that. Paul.
The question is, do we see an actor? Well, I write plays, so it wasn't that hard for me to see an actor, and I sort of think that way myself. And so it was it's in script format. So from the beginning, I thought of this as, a text that was going to be performed on a stage, not something that I was going to read or somebody would read privately in their home.
And I was picturing him the whole time, but I think I occasionally lost sight of him addressing the audience and preferred him being, as I said, exasperated with himself or about his situation. But the whole time he's communicating that to the audience.
Yeah, I guess I always thought of him as, imagining this audience out there. I mean, even as, actors, even if they're alone in the theater, they imagine the audience to be out there, as they're practicing. So they came naturally to me, I guess.
More questions, please. Yes, in the front.
That was great. Thank you so much. That was really fun. I have a couple of things, as usual, as Annelise knows me. First of all, about Master ChatGPT. I would just say that given the terrible translation of the beginning, no one would read this. No one would keep reading. So I think that's a relief to most of us, and I think it's a good thing. I was impressed by the use of italics to stress some of the ideas, and I wonder, Daniel, did you actually use italics? I can't remember seeing the German up there.
I did not. Very good point. I missed that, yeah. Very good point. I did not, yeah. So there was, I guess there was ChatGPT's choice.
And another question for you. Did you intend this to be as funny as it is?
Yes, yes.
Good.
The whole the whole thing is a comedy. Yes, the whole thing is a comedy, and it's not a one-act play. There will be a second man coming in through the window actually, and giving how you were prepared by the little play to that point, you will think he's imagining the other guy, but the other guy is actually a homeless person who's in the room next door, because they put in hotel quarantine on the peak time of COVID, they put people who didn't have a home because they did movies or whatever, or they put homeless people in hotels, at least in Europe. So, and the homeless person, of course, doesn't care about quarantine. He's not a rule follower. So then it turns into two people talking to each other.
I don't want to hog, but I have a question for the translators. Why COVID and Corona?
I'll start. As I said, I Americanized it, and we say COVID. At the beginning, it was both, but it fairly quickly turned out that Europeans, or at least German speakers, said Corona, and we said COVID, so I went that way.
I think they're both in the German text, right?
In German, you say both, or both is kind of in use.
In the text, they're both
I think so.
used.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't.
So I think I just went with what was used in the text. I didn't actually think about that question.
In German, you really say both. So I didn't check now, but it would make sense that it's both in the text. I say both. Jodok would probably say both. Yeah.
I'd like to give the translators an opportunity to ask each other questions. Or I'll ask another question.
I was warned about this, so I thought about and I was going to ask if, as an American, I like to be comfortable with what I'm translating and have it be consistent within itself. So I think a lot about it being American idiom. That's not always the best choice. In fact, in this case, you could say, well, it takes place in England, and he's an actor, so thespian, so maybe I shouldn't have done that. Do you think about?
It's not in England because he can't enter England.
Oh, that's right, because he can't come to England.
It's somewhere outside of England. He can't get in.
I think I slightly Americanized it in my translation a little bit. I can't even think of which words exactly, but, well, in the curse words and a couple of other spots. I think I chose something a little more vulgar and American because I'm an American and because we were going to have an American audience, and there was really no faithfulness to one or the other in the German text, so I felt free to do that. And I somehow felt that this character was also a little bit more brash, and so I didn't want him to be that polite. I wanted him to be more American and more direct and maybe a little bit crude, because he's kind of offensive also in the end.
I don't know German, but I'm very curious about the German word. And now we have 3 rendition of Schrödinger and his wife, idiotic and moronic, and I forget what your translation is.
I think I chose stupid fucking asshole.
Asshole, right. So I'm very curious what the German word is.
Yeah, it's
Oh, fucking idiot asshole.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
der völlig verblödete Arsch. Schrödinger, so it's pretty close to stupid fucking asshole. And then it says seine genauso verblödete Frau. So it's something like, I don't know what you had, his equally...
Yeah, equally.
Moronic or something?
I used moronic.
Yeah. I mean...
His equally fucking idiot asshole wife.
So he first he insults the man, then his wife, and the funny thing is your version is closer to how he insults the man, and yours is closer to how he insults his wife in the original.
But I should point out that ChatGPT did something wrong there, because if they're equally idiotic, then you shouldn't use idiot and idiotic. It should be the same phrase, right? It should be the same word, in my opinion.
And actually, utterly brain-dead idiot is much less vulgar, which is, again, I mean, one of those filters they imposed on GPT is it's not allowed to be vulgar. So, yeah.
And the German word is Arsch, which isn't exactly asshole, but I just thought that's what we say instead. Ass doesn't quite get it across, which is the direct translation of Arsch.
And I felt that the vulgarity, if you will, here at the end was sort of integral. This polite version would be actually quite incorrect, because you want him to break that barrier of polite diction and to show, at least in the text, how angry and kind of out of control he is as a character.
And it prepares us for the last thing he says, which is what got him in trouble. Right?
So this will be the last question.
Actually, it's just a technical question. Would it be possible to see them side by side at the same time, the versions?
I tried, but the font was very, very small.
Oh, okay.
But thank you very much for the question. As we move toward our conclusion here, the last thing I'd like to ask Jeff and Paul, and perhaps also Daniel, is about these long sentences. And as translators, we're always tempted to break them up to make our lives easier, rather than trying to string all the clauses together. Were either of you tempted?
It's a very good question, because in the text, they really do run on. And then in German, you can write, Thomas Mann has these sentences that go on for a page and a half, and they're perfectly grammatical, but what's happening here is it's more like the English run-on sentence, where it's not grammatical. They're just main clause after main clause with some kind of connection in between them. And to some large extent, more than I would normally do in my own writing or in translating something else, I sort of kept the spirit of this person who's just sort of talking and talking and talking and doesn't really have a stopping point. But a couple of them I did break up, because they really went on for quite some time, and I thought of myself performing it, and I wanted to give myself a break there before the next sentence started.
In one instance, I used a personal pronoun instead of a relative pronoun, so that was pretty daring.
So speaking of running on and on, we can keep these conversations going, but our hosts, this is our time for now. So just please, warm applause to our guests today, to Daniel Kehlmann, Geoffrey Howes, and Paul David Young.
Thank you so much to our participants for such an exciting and wonderful event, and thank you all for coming. Wanted to direct you over to the booksellers table for pre-signed copies of the books, and also we have a event starting in this space again shortly. If you do have tickets for that event as well, you can go to the box office upstairs and receive your ticket and then come back down. Thank you. Thank you.